Hello my fellow bats, welcome back to my channel. It feels so strange, wonderful, nerve-wracking, exciting, all of those things to be filming again for you guys specifically. And I'm gonna be honest with y'all, okay? I don't know how this video is gonna go. Alright, I hope it goes well. Let me tell y'all. Okay, so obviously this is another books and makeup video, right? And today I'm going to be talking about The Death of Jane Lawrence by Caitlin Starling. How beautiful is this? How beautiful is this? Oh my gosh. It's gorgeous. So obviously I'm going to be talking about this, right? But here's the thing. I finished reading it all the way back in June, okay? I don't know how this is going to go. Hopefully it goes well. But just be prepared, okay? If it seems like I'm a mess or like it's a mess, that's why. I really have no suitable explanation. Well, I do, but I don't. It's just gonna be the same thing you heard before as to why I haven't filmed or uploaded or any of that, because I did film one video, or tried to anyways, but the entire last half of it got lost. Well, it wasn't even like recorded because the camera broke. Anyways, so it was just of like it was just a lot of analysis paralysis, right? Like that's probably the biggest reason. Oh my gosh. Probably the biggest reason why I never filmed anything was because, well, now that I've been gone for this long, I can only come back with something that's amazing, right? So, and that just put even more pressure on myself, but doesn't matter now. Point is, I am here and I am back and I love it. And whether or not this video goes excellent, I'm going to do it and I'm going to upload it for you guys and put something out there for you guys because I miss you guys, especially since I don't have social media anymore. So, I mean, I guess I could have made a post, but those are weird and only a few of you guys actually look at those. So, point is, we're here now. So, let's move on. All right, The Death of Jane Lawrence, you guys. This book. This book, okay. Where do I begin with this book? I don't even know. Well, I guess I should begin at the beginning, right? Because that's how we normally do these videos. Let me know if you want a different format of these videos, because normally what I do is I'll literally just I'll like walk you through the book from beginning to end. Yes, I do include the ending in these videos because I'm not just gonna like leave you hanging, first of all. Second of all, I need to make sure the videos are long enough while I do my makeup. And it'll give you a better idea of whether or not you actually want to read it for yourself. But anyways, sorry. Clearly it's been a while since I filmed, right? Because I just keep talking. This book is interesting, all right? I have mixed feelings about it because it starts off really good, right? Well, in my opinion, it starts off pretty good. I mean, it has like typical, in the like first half to 2/3-ish, it has typical you know, gothic romance novel type vibes, right? In my opinion, it kind of echoes, like, it has Jane Eyre meets Rebecca meets Crimson Peak type vibes, right? But obviously it's its own piece, but that's kind of what it came off as to me, if that helps give you an idea of the nature of this book. So there's that. But then, okay, in the middle, it takes like you're going along right down this path that the book's taking you, right? And then all of a sudden it goes, and you're like, what? And then it just like goes down and it just spirals and you're like, what am I reading? It takes place in England, not London, somewhere in England, I think. It's like post-war Britain type thing going on, okay? That's what's happening. And it starts off, obviously, our main character, her name is Jane. I don't remember her maiden name, probably. And you know what? I'm gonna take my septum out because it's just like, I need to get a new one. I just ordered some new ones, but better the proper size. So the main character, her name is Jane, okay? And we start off looking at her this certain point in time in her life, right, where she has her first meeting, I suppose, with this man named Augustine Lawrence. I don't know, I have mixed feelings about that name, Augustine. She is an orphan. Her parents specifically her mother, I think, was killed in this war that's going on. I don't know the specifics of it. I don't know if it's based on truth or, you know, real historic events, or if it's just in the book, but, you know, she was orphaned by the war. So this couple named the, oh my gosh, I can't remember, Cunninghams. The Cunninghams take her in and basically raise her because she was orphaned as a child. So there's that. And Jane's cool, man. I think of her as a blue, like the color, personality type, whatever. I think she's a blue. She's very pragmatic, very practical. She loves math, okay? Come on, Jane. She loves like organizing things, right? She's a blue, like very rational. And she's even that way with marriage and her future prospects, right? I mean, back then, your options were very limited as a woman. And she's very smart. Like, she could totally, you know, support herself, like, financially, but job opportunities weren't really, you know, that much of a thing back then for women, and let alone doing what she can do, which is basically like balancing the books, so to speak, organizing paperwork, you know, ledgers, all that kind of stuff. That's what she's great at. She's comfortable in numbers, and she needs to always be working, okay? I mean, obviously take breaks, but she's not like a busybody, right? Like, she always has to be, like, the difference between a busybody and someone who's doing, you know, actual work and not just like running around looking like they're doing stuff, but really they're not, you know. And she just always needs to be working, doing something, like moving the wheels, turning the gears in her mind, so to speak. Okay, she always needs to be doing that. So of course that carries over into her future prospects in terms of marriage, right? Marriage is not her thing. It's not really, you know, lovey-dovey romance, not her thing. Like, she ain't got time for that, okay? She basically, I love her. She puts together this list, right? She basically makes a list of all the men in town, all of the eligible bachelors who could be potential matches for her. And she goes through pros and cons, and basically she thinks right now, every variable, that matters in terms of her choosing her boo, but not really, because she's not really into the whole boo thing. She narrows it down to her prime candidate, like number one choice, right, is this man named Augustine Lawrence, referred to as Dr. Lawrence or Mr. Lawrence because he's the town's doctor, okay? This man, at first I thought he was cool, but then, and that's one of the things about this book we'll talk later once we get to the end, like do the actual mini analysis, not too in depth of it, but you know, of it at the end. But like, cause you know how like normally in Gothic novels, right, the man is like, you have two kinds of men, okay? You have the one who's just like overpowering, entirely bad, just not, like, he is very clearly the bad guy, right? And then you have the other man who's the exact opposite, who's supposed to, you know, swoop in. But then anyways, this, it's a little more complex than that for reasons that we'll get into. Anyway, so he is her primary choice, so to speak. Give me a second to do my eyebrows and then I'll come back. Whew. Alright, that took way too long. Sorry, and now I completely forgot where I left off. Also, this book is written in third person, so there's that too, if you care about that kind of thing. He's pretty, like, chill, like, he's quiet, you know, from what she's observed. You know, he's pretty stable. He doesn't have any kids from any past relationships that she knows of, so there's that. From what she's observed and heard about him, he doesn't come off as super romantic. He's not like, he doesn't push himself on women. He's not just like every other guy in town, basically. And she thinks he won't, like, you know, push her to do something that she doesn't want to do. She thinks he would be okay with I don't want to say a platonic marriage, so to speak, but in her mind, basically, this marriage will just be more of like a business type of arrangement, right? Like, zero romance, like, I am only marrying you, like, on paper, so I can have a place to live. That's not, you know, the, what are their names? Cunninghams. I can get, you know, not be a burden to them. All of that. Does that make sense? I hope so. Yeah, we're going in with the tape, you guys. Whatever. That being said, the book opens up with their first meeting. Because, you know, back then, like, the way they did marriage proposals back then, it was very different. But basically, long story short, they meet for the first time. And she's like, hey, let me, before, because he's freaking out, right? Like, he does not want to be married to anyone ever. That's the vibe we're getting from him. And he's like, I don't even know you, like, this is crazy, you want to marry me, like, what? So she's like, okay, hold up, let me explain. It'll be more like a business arrangement, and plus, it'll be more like I'm just your employee, because I am great at math, and I know how to do accounting, and I can balance your books, basically help you run the business end of your surgery. That's what they called it back then, like doctor's offices, surgeries, you know, because he's that kind of doctor. He's like a surgeon, and, you know, doctors back then did a little bit of everything, but that's what he does. So she's explaining this all to him, and he's like, maybe. No romance? Okay, maybe. Of course, well, we'll get to that. So, you know, he's like, okay, let's maybe try this out. Come over to the surgery tomorrow, and we'll see how you do. You know, you can take a look at my books. You can just see how things are operated. We'll go from there. So she's like, cool. So she walks over. Also, Jane isn't really that religious. Religion isn't really a thing in this book, just so you know. Just want to make that clear. So next day she goes over. A bunch of stuff happens. Okay. So, okay. First of all, she learns that this man has kind of a morbid curiosity, morbid touch to him. Obviously, he's a surgeon, he's a doctor, he's got all these creepy things, but in his personal office, I guess you could call it, his private office, he also has like a bunch of like skulls, and he's got this ring that's made out of bone from a patient that he couldn't save once, and just all this stuff. Kind of sounds cool for people like us, you know. She's like, okay, makes sense, kind of weird, but okay. But it's kind of crazy because their first day working together, so to speak, a man comes in. Y'all don't need to know his name because it doesn't matter, and also I forgot. He comes in, and he's got like, he like cut himself open, okay, because he's trying to remove something that's inside of him. And long story short, they get it out, but he dies. And this whole time, you know, Jane gets involved while the Dr. Lawrence is trying to get this thing out of him, and their hands touch and stuff, and, you know, and she's like, don't feel anything. Anyways, long story short, yes, the man dies, and da-da-da. The doctor's assistant, I think his name is Mr. Lowell, if I'm remembering correctly, Mr. Lowell. They're talking outside the office while Jane is, you know, calming down after that whole traumatic experience for her. She's never done that before. Blood on her hands, all that crazy stuff, right? She overhears the men speaking outside, and Dr. Lowell's freaking out because he's like, you know, hey, so I heard this guy was like there's like a ring of salt around him, and da-da-da. Basically, it's magic. Jane doesn't know this right now, but basically, he's like, dude, this guy was practicing magic. We need to, like, tell people. Oh, I forgot that also. At this point, the doctor, Dr. Lawrence, Augustine, he calls a friend of his in. Her name is Dr. Nizamiev. I don't know why I said it like that. It's because it's Russian, and I'm like, yeah, Nizamiev. I can't say it right, but her name is Dr. Nizamiev, and like, when this character is first introduced, I'm like, okay, she's cool, you know, all dark and mysterious and Russian, so she's like, you know, like that, you know what I'm trying to say. She's very straightforward, to the point, you know. I ain't got time for for, you know. He calls her over. She looks at him, sees that he's dead, and she's like, you basically wasted my time, you know, because he's, yeah. Anyways, we find out why later, why he called her over. It's this whole thing. We'll get into it. Anyway, so that happens. She overhears them talking outside. Wow, weird that they're talking about, you know, a ring assault. What does that have to do with him hurting himself? Da-da-da, whatever, it doesn't matter. So, Dr. Lawrence comes in, brings her some tea, and then, like, you know how it is with people, especially, you know, when, like, they're trying to get together and they try... Long story short, there's like some there's like some tension there, right? And like, Jane's like, what am I feeling? Like, cause she's never been in love before. Again, she ain't got no interest in that. She don't care about that, okay? She just cares about, you know, living a simple life where, you know, she's not on the streets, stuff like that, you know? She's pragmatic. Anyways, so she's like, what am I feeling? What is this? What are these things called feelings? Yeah, it's just like this whole thing. And then she like goes back home and she's like, what just happened? Can this really work? Can we really have this kind of business arrangement type marriage and all that? And Augustine's a man, so of course he's like, you know, I mean, he like, you can tell he's kind of like off about it. Like, he's apprehensive, I guess would be the more accurate term, because he's like, ain't no such thing as that kind of marriage unless y'all like literally like, yeah. Anyways, and then of course the consummation of the marriage does come up, and she's like, if you want to do it, then one and done, cool, we ain't gotta worry about it, think about it no more, whatever. It can be that kind of thing, because, you know, legally, I guess back then legally, like, you had to consummate it in order for it to be valid or something like that. Their relationship is so strange. Like, it's kind of cool because it starts off, because, you know, especially back then, like, women were just like married off to whoever, men they like either never met before, didn't really know, you know, that kind of thing. So it starts off like that, or with those kind of vibes, except she chose him, you know, and she's like, hey, let's just make this work, whatever. Long story short, they get married, right? Okay. And but here's one of the other things too, okay? So he's like, okay, fine, but if we do get married, you can't, cause this place, his surgery, whatever, it's livable, right? It's kind of like, think a house, but then on the first floor there's the surgery, there's a waiting room, lounge, whatever, stuff like that. Upstairs there's the office, and then there's other rooms, right, that are habitable, could basically be bedrooms. So he's like, you gotta live here. You can't come with me home to Lindridge Hall, which is, you know, where he actually lives, his actual home, so to speak, family house, whatever. And she's like, what? Like, I'm your wife, you're telling me I can't live with you? That's basically what he's telling her. So she's like, it just gets to the point where she's like, fine, whatever. So basically every night, so every day they'd be there at the surgery together, and then at night Augustine would leave, go home, leave her there. And of course, you know, within the context of a business arrangement type of marriage, that seems fine, right? Whatever. It might look sketchy. I mean, they did talk about that too. Like, it might look strange for, you know, people looking in on the outside, because they still want it to look like a relatively normal marriage, right? Like, they don't want it to, because, you know, they still gotta, like, especially back then, like, people be talking, right? This is not blending well at all, and it's driving me crazy. You know, they get married, everything's great, whatever. So her parents are proud of her. They're like, yay, we're so proud of you. Look, you got married. Mr. Lowell has mixed feelings about it. He's kind of like, eh. Originally, their original plan was to, you know, because the way marriage worked back then, you, like, take a carriage, you go off home, whatever. But they told the driver to take them back to the surgery to make it seem like the surgery is going to be their home now, kind of. But the driver and Mr. Lowell is there too, and he's whatever. Long story short, they end up at Lindridge Hall, which they weren't supposed to do, but they're there, so they're like, fine, I guess we'll eat whatever, and then Jane, you can leave later. So Jane gets to explore, you know, certain rooms she can't go into, right? We got that vibe going on. Strange dark place, old, kind of falling apart, probably shouldn't be living here, that kind of thing, right? So you see what I'm saying with Crimson Peak Rebecca vibes? You know, there's a bunch of servants there, whatever. I'm not gonna talk about the servants. So it's just a bunch of like feelings, right? Like they start getting into each other, you know, digging each other romantically, right? But they're also like they're like, it's weird because it's like they're fighting it, but they don't want to fight it, but they do because business arrangement, right? Like it's not supposed to be that kind of marriage, and the subject of consummating the marriage comes up and all of that, whatever. Long story short, after all of these like feelings and weird awkward conversations and, you know, eating dinner with, not with the servants, but, you know, with the servants, whatever, it's decided that Jane should leave and go back to the surgery, especially because now it's like raining, right? Because rain was a big deal back then. Long story short, on their drive back to the surgery, the storm was so bad that the carriage crashed. The horses got stuck or something, carriage crashed, whatever. You know, typical, like, that typically happens in Gothic novels, right? Where the carriage crashes in the middle of the night and it's dark and storm and, you know. So that does happen. And she tells the... whatever. She's so independent. She tells the guy to go off, take the carriage horse, save the horse, whatever, go back to town. I'll turn around and just go back to Lindridge Hall or something like that. No, the horse ran off and he had to go find it. It doesn't matter. Point is, she ends up running on foot. Wow. I like scratched myself. She ends up running back to Lindridge Hall, right? And she's like knocking on the door. She's soaking wet. It's cold, okay? I'm like, this girl is really, and no one's answering the door. Like, she was like, I was just here. Why aren't the servants here? Because the servants are gone. The only light in the house is, like this. It's coming from Augustine's study. She's like, why isn't he answering the door? I'm literally banging, calling out his name. Like, why? Anyways, point is, she eventually gets in. She goes upstairs. It's all spooky, creepy, right? Thunderstorm, strange mansion type place, you know, those kind of vibes. So she gets to Augustine's study and she sees him, and he's kind of like, he's the exact opposite of like who she thought she married and who she's seen up until this point, because he's like huddled up next to the fireplace or whatever. He's very paranoid and just afraid. At first, he thinks she's like a figment of his imagination, so to speak. Once he snaps out of it and realizes that she's real. I know, very strange, but that's just where we're at. Oh my gosh, oh no. Basically, he runs her bath. You can't stay in my parents' house, or in my parents' room. She's like, why can't we just sleep in your parents' room? You know, why can't we sleep together? You know, she's like pushing the boundaries, so to speak, of her own arrangement, right? Which is just hilarious. You know, it's the next day, things are fine, whatever. So he goes to work, so to speak, at the surgery, and she stays at Lindridge Hall, believe it or not. I know, crazy, I can't remember the reasoning behind that, but she stays there. And he tells her she can look through his books, you know, so to speak, like basically just look at his past ledgers, whatever. Like he keeps records of food he buys and whatever. So she starts looking through all that stuff. And she finds out about this patient who actually stayed at Lindridge Hall. And her name is Elodie, okay? She actually died. So she finds that out and she's like, who's Elodie? Who is this person? How come he couldn't save her? Da da da, all these questions, right? So, of course, when he gets back home, she brings it up to him. And he's like, oh, she was just a patient, you know, I couldn't save her. She died of tuberculosis. Or not tuberculosis. It was something like that. Anyways, so she's like, okay. She was like, oh, I was afraid you were holding some dark secret. And he was like, yeah, lol. It was a long time ago, like, whatever. She's like, okay. So, and of course he would do this. He, like, plays on her emotions. Long story short, they end up in bed together, if you know what I mean. Because he just uses that as a way to get her to stop asking questions. And she's, you know, this whole time she's like reeling in her mind. She's like, who have I married? Is he lying to me? Is he not lying to me? Is he as good as I thought he was, or as I want to believe he is? So to get her to stop asking questions, he just sleeps with her. I know. Well, that's not the whole reason, but that's like, you can tell, like, that's like one of the main reasons why. You know, he just, emotions, man, emotions. And she totally rolls with it. Even though it's like a clear violation of their, well, kind of their arrangement, so to speak. She wakes up in the middle of the night, right? It's just past midnight. Now here's where things get spooky. Oh, I need my black eyeshadow. Not my black eyeshadow, the black eyeshadow, okay? The only black eyeshadow I will probably ever use in my entire life, because it is the blackest. La Favorite by Tatter Rounds in collaboration with YGA Resurrected. Anyways, she goes to the library, okay? And in the library, of course, she starts reading a mathematical book, okay? And it talks about dividing by 0. It doesn't mention imaginary numbers, but she starts reading that, and she's like, oh, LOL, sounds like magic. Like, you know, dividing by 0, making something from nothing, da-da-da. Anyways, so she's sitting there reading, starting to doze off, getting tired, right? And then there's movement. Now, keep in mind, the storm's still going outside, okay? There's movement. She's like, oh no. So, long story short, these big shadowy figures come out of the bookcases that line the walls of the library, and they start chasing. Well, she thinks they're after her, but really they're after Augustine. So she's like, she just witnessed ghosts come out of bookcases, and, well, I don't want to call them ghosts. They're more like shadowy figures. Anyways, they go after Augustine because they start heading towards the study, so she goes there. So she, you know, rushes over to the study thinking, oh, I have to save Augustine. Not that she really knows how she's going to do that, but she gets there, and he's just standing there, you know, like it's a normal midnight type of night, right? And he turns around because she just bursts in the room, like, he turns around and he's like, Jane, are you okay? What's going on? And so the last thing she sees is behind him in the window, she sees a reflection of this ghostly woman figure with, like, red eyes and, you know, Crimson Peak type vibes, right? Except, yeah, anyways, so, and for some reason, she comes to the conclusion, which is a valid conclusion and turns out to be accurate, but she comes to the conclusion that that's Elodie's ghost, and she's like, and in the reflection, Elodie's ghost was like that. Wow, dramatic, right? So that happened, and she ends up fainting, like most women do in gothic novels. Okay. So she ends up fainting, okay, and then the next morning, okay, it's as if nothing happened. Augustine's acting normal, like that didn't just happen. He's like, oh no, you just had a nightmare, whatever, it's fine. So he goes to work, leaves her there to go through, you know, books or whatever. So she's sitting there thinking she's crazy now. She's like, am I crazy? Am I not crazy? There's no way I'm crazy. Why is he acting like this? So that's how he's making her feel right now. Anyways, fast forward through the day, right? So a bunch of doctors show up, and they're like, yo, we're friends of Augustine. We were invited over or whatever, right? I can't remember if they actually were. Actually, I think he specifically told them not to come over, Anyways, so they basically let themselves into the house. Turns out they're like some of Augustine's colleagues from, back in his early doctor days and when he was, still going to school and stuff for doctoring, surgery, whatever you want to call it. She basically gets to meet all his friends, all his doctor friends. But through her conversations with his lovely doctor friends, she, of course, the truth comes out. She learns that Elodie was in fact his former wife, ex-wife, whatever, dead wife, now dead, and that she actually died under his care, and he was trying to take care of her, trying to save her. She died. So, yeah. That's that. She's like, wow, good to know. So, when Augustine does eventually get back home, of course, he is very upset to find that these friends of his are there. He basically tried not cutting ties with them. That's a little too dramatic and intentional, but like he just didn't want to be involved with them anymore. So, and then Dr. Nizamiev is there too. She was in their friend group, I guess, and she's just hanging around like a hawk, watching Jane very closely. This woman. So, okay, this part, let me tell y'all, this next part, when she confronts him, let me tell y'all, okay, because she's like, I know you lied to me, Augustine. I could not be an actor or like a voice actor or anything, because I would not be able to take anything seriously. So yeah, she's like confronting him. She's like, I know you lied to me. I know what I saw last night. And he's like, but Jane, right? And she's like, I know about Elodie. About who she really was. A patient, Augustine? A patient, not your wife? And he's like, at first he's freaking out, right? He's like, oh no. But then he puts on his stone man face, right? And he was like, this was never supposed to be a true marriage, Jane. This was never supposed to be a true marriage? Okay, so what just happened last night? Okay, what was that? What did that mean? Everything you said, everything you were talking about, what you mean this is never supposed to be a true marriage? That's what it is now, okay? Look, oh. I got so upset when I read that. Y'all don't understand. You asked me to marry you as a business arrangement only. I agreed for that reason only. I told you that you could not come here, and you were more than happy to agree as well. And he grimaced. Is it betrayal or is it jealousy, this fury over Elodie? Because you don't own this part of me. I didn't offer it in the bargain. He was right. And it says she hadn't known to ask for honesty. She didn't realize all that she'd wanted. It was a miscalculation, an error of judgment. The worst part about what he said was that he's right. Like, he's right. He's right. And emotions got in and muddied everything up and made everything all complicated. Anyways, that upset me. And it upset her too. And it sucks because he's right. It sucks because he's right. And I'd be so hurt, so upset. Okay. I mean, she also should have known better, though. Like, she should have known that... But also, how could she know? Because she's never... I feel a lot about this, clearly. Okay. So, we're just gonna move on. So that ends that conversation, and everything's, like, tense from that point on between them, like, while the guests are over and the uninvited guests are over. They go back to the party, whatever. Augustine basically just, like, leaves. He just ditches. He runs from the situation. Like, he literally just leaves, and he's like, I want all y'all out. Leave, and then I'm gonna leave too, basically, is how that happens. So, you know, but they end up getting stuck there for some reason. I think because of the storm. It's too bad for all of them to leave, so they're stuck there. Dr. Nizamiev, remember her and Jane basically get to talking, right? Dr. Nizamiev, turns out she basically runs or is the head doctor of or whatever an insane asylum. Wow, my makeup's terrible. What is this? Like, it comes up in conversation that her or I mean, Augustine and all of his doctor friends were into magic, okay? Oh, this actually comes up while Augustine is still there. Comes up that they were all into magic and they practiced it, so to speak, while they were all in school and while Elodie was alive, and that Elodie wanted to be a part of it too. And it was just like a hot mess. Like, think of like teenagers trying something new and cool and they just like mess it up, right? And then this is where it just like takes a turn, okay? And you're like, what am I reading? Because at this point, with the introduction of magic, you're like, okay. And like, especially the way it's explained in the book. And from here on out, things get crazy and weird and strange, and it's just kind of ridiculous, honestly, and frustrating to deal with, for me at least. It like tries to explain magic. Like magic and math, okay? Because, you know, Jane's good at math, and so, you know, whatever. So it uses kind of math and science to explain magic, or it tries to. It tries to make them kind of the same thing, but not really, obviously. So the group of doctors is stuck there, right? And they're like, hey, while we're stuck here, let's practice some magic, you know, because... And then they explain, oh yeah, we totally used to do magic like all the time, way back when, with Augustine. Augustine's like, nope, I'm out. So he leaves, leaving Jane there, leaving his wife there, knowing what they could potentially do. So they involve Jane in some kind of like initiation type ritual, like God only knows what they're actually doing to her. It's still not clear, but long story short, they do some stuff in the library. And it's like this weird, I don't fully understand it, okay, to be honest. If you want to know more, you can read it for yourself. But basically Jane ends up having like this vision, so to speak, while she's on this altar. And it was like Elodie on a table, and Augustine was in her chest, was like, Augustine had basically just like plunged a knife into her, cut her chest open, and was like doing something with her heart. And she's like, oh my gosh, what am I seeing right now? I just hurt myself, my eyeball, now it's red. So basically it's a vision of how Elodie died, right? And Augustine, from the looks of it looked like Augustine was trying to, like, she couldn't tell if Augustine was killing her or doing some sort of ritual to save her. Point is, she was traumatized, and this whole like magic thing like wore her out basically. And so now she's basically like, it hurt is what I'm trying to say. Like, it just, the whole thing is just so weird, okay? But, you know, the doctors had their fun with her, whatever. They're all like, oh, she's a medium. She's a true medium. Like, you know, we can imagine all the cool things we can do through her and da-da-da, whatever. That's when Dr. Nizamiev comes over and she starts explaining to her about magic and, you know, all that jazz. So here's what she says. I want to read it to you because it's just hilarious. Okay. She's like, you must promise me one thing before I continue. Okay. She's talking to her about what just happened in magic and all that. Jane's like, okay. Dr. Nizamiev says that you will accept as true everything I am about to tell you. It will not be easy, but it must become a part of your understanding of the world, or else I will have wasted my time. So she goes on to explain magic as logically as she possibly can, okay? She says, perhaps you can think of magic then at its most basic as changing numbers, shifting the reality of a thing, making it into something else. So there's that. And then later she's like, it's madness. And Dr. Nizamiev is like, madness? Yes, it is. So, you know, it kind of like implies that, you know, Dr. Nizamiev is like a doctor of the mad because she wants access to that power, that control of magic that it seems only the mad can, or like that drives them. That's what drives them mad, is like, it's this whole thing. Just read the book, okay? Because honestly, from here on, it's like a hot mess, okay? And it's frustrating. Like, okay, so here's what happens afterwards. So, something happens to where, you know, the doctors end up leaving, whatever. So Augustine basically like ran away from this. He basically just ran away from Jane, from the doctors, from magic, from all of it. He basically just ran away. He's been hiding out at the surgery, okay? So Jane is in the house, you know, by herself exploring. So there's this one part of the house that Augustine told her not to go to because it was supposedly dangerous. But now that her husband's lying to her, she's like, well, what else has he been lying to me about? And she goes to this big door that basically leads down to what Augustine told her was a cellar, and that it was dangerous to go in because it might collapse, whatever. Well, she goes down there, and it's basically like this whole thing. It's like almost like a whole, I don't want to say city, but like, it's a crypt, okay? It's a crypt, and she finds, you know, his parents, Elodie, all of that down there, and like this ritualistic table with all these chairs around it, stuff like that. So she finds that. This ain't no cellar that's almost collapsing. It's a crypt where you do your magic stuff. Anyways, so while she's down there, she has another encounter with the Elodie ghost. We'll call her that, with Elodie the ghost, okay? And she basically almost dies because Elodie tries killing her. She like chokes her or whatever. Anyways, it's so strange, like later. Anyways, so, and so she runs out, afraid for her life, for obvious reasons. A ghost just tried to kill me. So she runs all the way to the surgery. Anyway, so while she's there, she learns that, you know, another reason, so basically Augustine tells her the truth. Yes, Elodie was my wife. She was dying of a condition that I couldn't help save her from, so I tried to use magic to save her. Didn't work. Yes, I cut out her heart and did all this stuff to her. Didn't work, clearly. So, and now I'm paying the price for trying to use magic, basically, is what he says. And so, and Dr. Nizami have talked about a little bit about this too, how like the practice of magic comes at a price. Well, kind of. Well, because then why wouldn't the other, whatever. It kind of feels like the author's trying to make it all make sense, but in a hot mess type of way to where it doesn't make sense. So basically, the longer Augustine is away from Lindridge Hall, the sicker he gets, okay? So basically, in order to stay alive and healthy for some reason, I don't think this was ever fully explained. Maybe it was and I just missed it because I was too frustrated by what I was reading. That's why Augustine has to go back to Lindridge Hall every night. That's why he has to live there, basically, and he can't be away for too long, is because if he does, he gets sick. And that's why when Jane gets to the surgery where Augustine has been hiding out, so to speak, he's super sick. So she's like, okay, you need to fix this, okay? Because clearly magic is your issue here, and you need to face it, stop running away, go back, fix this whole situation, get rid of those ghosts or whatever you want to call them, make yourself not be sick, whatever. She's like, you basically need to fix this. You need to fight. You need to fix this, okay? In the middle of all this, they get another patient. It's a pregnant lady, loses her baby. I think, I can't remember if she ends up dying or not. Sorry. Augustine ends up going back to Lindridge Hall. Jane convinces him to go back just to help him, you know, at least get better, because apparently he recharges there or whatever. While she stays back and takes care of the patient, you know, makes sure, basically nurses her back to health while she's there. Some other people are come over and they're like, we need help. Our son is dying, basically. And she's like, shoot, the doctor isn't here, but let me go get him. So she goes to Lindridge Hall to go find him. She finds him and she's like, we gotta go. It's just a mess. It's a mess and it stresses me out. Long story short, they run into some more ghosts. Now, here's the thing. Augustine sees his patients, okay? He sees his past patients, all the patients who died. So it's like a guilt type thing, right? And it's clearly haunting him. Should I contour my jawline? Jane doesn't see that. Jane sees these just big, dark, shadowy figures, right? They aren't like anything. I mean, they clearly have malicious intent, right? But you know. And then it's so strange because all of a sudden there's like a switch in Augustine's mind. And he sees Jane and he thinks that I think it's because just all of this going in his mind and with what happened to Elodie, now he thinks Jane has the same sickness that Elodie had. And he's like, why didn't you tell me you had like a fever and you were lightheaded and this and that and your eyes are turning yellow and you have the same disease Elodie had. I made the mistake with her. I'm not going to make the same mistake with you. And so he basically momentarily loses his mind, okay? Poor Jane, he uses chloroform on her. He does that, you know. And oh my gosh, he takes her down to I almost said the fake cellar, the crypt, right, where he had Elodie, where he did the same thing to Elodie. And she's like, oh no. So she's like, this is not happening. So this whole time, of course, she's begging him to stop, and he ain't listening. He's like, I need to save you. It's gonna be fine. Just trust me. I'm gonna fix this. Okay? So he's clearly crazy right now. He's not thinking straight. Okay? And she's like, I need to get out of here. So she, by sheer force of will, if you can call it that, she ends up making it up the stairs right outside the, I'm just going to call it the cellar door, okay? He chases her up. She closes the cellar door, but she's obviously quite weak, right? Because she was just chloroformed or whatever. Like, Augustine had out his medical instruments. Like, he was legit about to stick a knife in her and, you know, do what he thought was right, so to speak. So he was literally about to do that. It's dumb. Maybe not. I don't know. Whatever. Long story short, you know, Jane is sitting there. She's like about to pass out. Okay. Her husband is like on a murderous rampage trying to kill her, but he thinks he's trying to save her. And, here's what happens. She basically wills, okay? Oh, wow, look at that. She basically wills the door away. That sounds strange, okay? Just, here's what that means. That means 1 second the door was there, okay? Normal, reality, whatever. The next, it was not there. And Augustine is basically trapped in the cellar. He has no way to get out. And Jane did it. Jane willed the door to go away because of magic or whatever, which implies like this whole, it's a mess. Like, but it like truly implies that if you just believe it hard enough, will it hard enough, and do all this stuff with chicken eggs and blood and all that, then it'll happen. Jane didn't do chicken egg stuff, but she does later. She basically gets help from Dr. Nizamiev. She's like, help. But she has to be careful too, because Dr. Nizamiev is obviously a doctor for the insane or whatever, so she doesn't want Dr. Nizamiev to think she's crazy, but also she's helping, so it's like a fine line she has to walk, right? So basically, Dr. Nizamiev gives her like this ritual type thing to follow that'll help her save Augustine, okay? And here's where it gets frustrating, because from here on out, it's a hot mess, okay? And it's just like, it feels like it drags on for so long. And it's like this battle between Jane's rational mind and the things that she's doing. And there's like even one point where the servants actually thought that Jane killed Augustine, and they go there and they try to like drag her away, claiming that she's crazy. And yeah, it's a mess. It's like this, what is it, a 7-day long ritual or something where she can't eat. I think it's also she can't sleep. There's a bunch of stuff in there, okay? I'm not going to remember every detail. If you want to know more about it, you can just read it. And I'm not going to sit here and explain to you every day of this ritual that she goes through, everything she has to do, everything she encounters and experiences, okay? If you want to know that, you're going to have to read it for yourself, because I don't have time to sit here and explain it to you. Well, maybe I do, but I don't want to, because honestly, it was frustrating for me to read. And then, like, you have the whole conundrum, if you want to call it, the fact that Jane is very rational, pragmatic, a blue, you know, very reality based or whatever, and now she has to redefine her reality in order to save her husband, who we don't even know if he's a good guy or a bad guy. Like, we can't decide, but she's like, yeah, he's done some pretty terrible things, but he's still my husband and I love him and I need to save him. You know, like, it's just frustrating from here on out, basically, is what I'm trying to say. And I'm sorry if that disappoints you. She also encounters what she thinks is Augustine, who she thought was Augustine, and they end up sleeping together. But what she slept with was not Augustine. So this whole willing into existence thing, right? Willing something to happen hard enough, and then it happens. That's supposedly magic here, okay? So she supposedly willed Augustine to be out, but who she was envisioning Augustine in his head, obviously, like, who we see someone as isn't necessarily exactly who they are, not all of them. So she basically, like, willed a fake Augustine into existence or something for a minute, and stuff happened. Like, it's just hilarious. I'm sorry. Me sitting here trying to explain all this magic hot messness is not helping you guys either, and I'm sure you guys are frustrated just listening to me try to talk about it. Long story short, she eventually gets to Augustine, but it's like she ends up in this weird base in this cellar. It's almost like a different world, but not quite. But turns out these creatures, this whole time we thought they were ghosts, they're not ghosts. They're just some kind of creature that feeds off of shame and guilt, right? By showing up as these ghosts. So it's basically been feeding off of Augustine, which is strange because, you know, when he leaves, he gets sick, but when he's there, he's fine. Like, it's so weird. Long story short, Jane eventually gets to Augustine, okay? And because she's been practicing magic this whole time and, you know, powerful magic, whatever, basically she's now developed that same tumor, so to speak, in her bowels, that same growth that man had in the beginning. So Augustine has to save her. Oh my gosh, that's not a mirror. So basically they do kind of like an emergency surgery down in the crypt. So she's basically like, oh, this is it, I'm dying. But she's also like, you can do it, Augustine, you can save me, just do it, just do it, whatever, right? So you remember how the whole knowing and willing into existence and knowing it, you know, that whole thing in terms of magic? Well, here's what she says. She's like, you've told me I will die either way, but maybe there's a chance. Knowing is the thing. Do the surgery and I will know that I will survive, and we'll see what happens. Undo the magic that's killing me. And then he's like, okay. Anyways, and then there's like a chapter 0. It's so weird. If you want to read it, and maybe it'll make sense to you, but it's just, I'm not even gonna, it's like this weird in between, and she's like sees herself. I'll read the end of that part for you. It says, he is her great working. And then Jane Shoringfield Lawrence closes her eyes and for the first time in many weeks accepts what life has given her. She dies. That's chapter 0. But then it goes to chapter 43, okay? And then it's like, just kidding. A gasp. A name. Jane? So, she's fine. It's done. The spell worked. But Jane, you died. I felt you die. I saw it. So basically it leaves with them, you know, like, let's just start over. Because this is a mess. So they're like, let's just start over. You know, let's, you know, just move somewhere else. Let's sell Lindridge Hall, just leave, go, whatever. And Jane's like, yeah, okay, that sounds good. So they do that. Or that's like where it ends. It ends with them just making that decision, coming to that conclusion. So I guess you could say that's kind of a happy ending, maybe-ish. Like, maybe lackluster. Or, because, I mean, they both live, right? So there's that. And they decided to leave town, kind of basically just start over. But then it also kind of implies that Dr. Nizamiev might, like, come after them later. It leaves room for interpretation, I guess. Or, like, it leaves room for like a maybe something else might happen, maybe not everything is okay type of thing. It leaves room for that. But yeah, that is basically the story of the death of Jane Lawrence. Now, what I've read, because I did, of course, like I like to get different opinions about things, and you know, after I've read it, think about how I consider it to be, like, you know, if I think it's good or not, and then also go see what other people think about it, you know, get other inputs and things like that. Apparently I wasn't the only one who was frustrated about the whole 5-7 days of magic that doesn't really make sense type of thing. Maybe it could have just been like how it was written. Would I recommend it? I guess. I mean, honestly, I'd like recommend the first half of the book, but the last half maybe not so much. Maybe, I don't know, maybe if, again, like I said before, maybe if you read it, you'll like understand more of it. It kind of felt like she was trying, like I understand, you know, doing something new that's never been done before or whatever, but it felt messy and like she was trying too hard to make sense of something that doesn't make sense, you know? That's what that felt like. And honestly, maybe it was just the way it was written. Maybe it could have been condensed or shorter or a different ritual, I don't know, but just something that wasn't so drawn out but also confusing. Because it was like you took a very pragmatic character, right? Very strong-willed, like, which I guess plays into the whole magic is basically knowing and just willing it, you know, that kind of thing. But then that would imply also, because Augustine willed, you know, or I guess maybe, because I'm thinking of the relation between Augustine and what he did to Elodie, but then also there's Dr. Nizamiev and the whole relation of magic to madness type of thing. If you think you can handle the last half of the book, then sure. Is it something I would read again? Heck nah. But I will definitely keep it on my bookshelf because it's pretty. And just to say that just so I can say that I have read it. What would I give this? Maybe like a 5. Maybe a 5.23. I would definitely read more, like another book of hers. So that is the book, The Death of Jane Lawrence by Caitlin Starling. I hope you guys enjoyed this video. Again, I'm glad I was able to make this video finally. Again, thank you so much for being patient with me. Thanks for sticking around, those of you who have still stuck around and are just patiently waiting or have been patiently waiting, so thank you. I appreciate each and every one of you guys. I'm gonna stop talking, hurry up and edit this video. Hopefully I can get it out tomorrow, but yeah. I hope you guys enjoyed, and I will see you in the next one. Bye.